It's Judgment Day coming, Sloth. West Ham versus Wolves. Julen Lopetegui versus Gary O'Neill. Two managers who have this game to save their job, really. So it's going to be an interesting one on Monday night. And yeah, huge 3 points on the line for both clubs with the relegation scrap getting a little bit more interesting. And yeah, it's going to be a tough game, but one we need to be targeting to win, despite the circumstances, despite what would happen if Lopetegui didn't win this game. But again, we have to put the club first, and we obviously want West Ham to win every single game possible. So we're going to break it down in our preview show, look at what Wolves are doing at the moment from their recent performance at Everton, or lack of performance, should I say, and how the two sides have been playing so far this season. So if you enjoy it, leave a like, subscribe, and yeah, let's go through it, Sloth. So just to start with, some of the baseline stats, again, the tail of the tape we normally do. So West Ham, 15 points to Wolves' 9. We've scored 18 goals to their 22. 27 goals conceded to Wolves' 36. And our position in the league is currently 14th, while Wolves sit in 19th position. When we look at the expected stats, it's kind of a similar picture. Our points are on 15.19, Wolves 12.16, so they're slightly underperforming. Expected goals scored of 22.16 for West Ham, just 14.85 for Wolves. Expected goals conceded of 29.64 for West Ham versus Wolves' 26.79, and an expected position of 16th to Wolves' 17th. So on the balance of things, we're slightly overperforming, being 14th, and Wolves are slightly underperforming, being in 19th. But again, pretty grim reading for both of these statistics. What have you made of the Wolves situation? You know, we'll get onto West Ham shortly. There's been a lot of talk around West Ham, but you know, Gary O'Neill is under massive pressure. Obviously, we saw the protests from the Wolves fans away at Everton. What's their situation looking from the outside in, Slough? Are they warranted to be doing this? Is it a similar situation to West Ham?
I mean, they're totally warranted to be doing it. I think a big problem for Wolves is that they've not addressed the issues in their squad. And you know, you look at who they've brought in. Strand Larsen, I think, is a great player, and he's someone that I would like at West Ham, to be honest. Or I think we need that mould of a player. But they have constantly underspent, and it is a really interesting comparison to West Ham because our owners have done exactly the same thing in terms of spending on perhaps the positions that they see as more glamorous or profitable in the long term, as opposed to addressing the actual issues in a squad. And you know, they brought in quite a lot of South American talent, quite a lot of Portuguese talent, and you know, a lot of it's working very well. But when you look at the issues in the squad, particularly this season, and it's coming from a back line that hasn't had the investment it needs. And, you know, that I think they have players like Craig Dawson, who you know what you're going to get and they're reliable. They have the creativity.
Other than the 2 own goals at the weekend.
Well, yeah, but Craig Dawson would be the first to tell you that, you know, yeah, hold his hands up and be accountable. But and what I think is redeemable about that is that he's at least trying, like he's at least making an attempt to play the ball and defend, as opposed to just it's haphazard and careless almost. But when you look at players like Aït-Nouri, apologies if I'm absolutely butchering that, I think it's Aït-Nouri actually, but they have the talent in that squad to be far higher in the league. And I think, like with West Ham, it is a case of the coach really holding them back. They shouldn't be at the bottom, particularly with the absolutely fantastic Mateus Cunha. So it must be incredibly frustrating for Wolves, just like it is for West Ham fans.
No, I agree. And, you know, there's actually, because I was, you know, a very sad individual, I watched the entire Everton Wolves game back on Friday night. And there was a lot of similarities in how Gary O'Neill has Wolves playing at the moment and with West Ham. So I think we can resonate as fans with what Wolves are currently going through, because, as you mentioned, they got some fantastic talent in their squad, as do West Ham. And I don't think Wolves should be in the position they are. But again, they've got some structural issues. And it was interesting because Wolves have predominantly played a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 this season. They tried a back three in the first half against Everton, and it didn't work. They then shifted back to a back four. It still didn't work. So we're going to get into some of those issues shortly. But just as an overview for Wolves this season so far, just to paint the picture, they are the worst defensive team in the Premier League with 36 goals conceded. They're the fifth worst based on expected defensive stats with a 26.79. So they've conceded slightly more than they should have, according to the data. However, when you're looking at the expected data again, they are the worst offensive team in the Premier League with just 14.85 expected goals from their 15 or 16 Premier League games so far. They rank 17th for expected points with 12.16. They're averaging around 1.57 goals per game with an XG of just over 1. But look at that. I mean, they're conceding over 2.5 goals a game with just under 2 expected goals against. And they're averaging just shy of 47% possession in the Premier League so far. So glaring issues for Wolves. I mean, defensively, they have been the worst. Again, whether it's expected or not, they've categorically been the worst team. And offensively, creating chances, being clinical in moments, they haven't been good enough going forwards. And, it's kind of a similar pattern to West Ham season. We haven't been good enough defensively. Structurally, we've left ourselves way too open. And teams have just found it way too easy to play through us. And it's a very similar story to Wolves because, I mean, we'll get onto it in a second. But going back to West Ham, Sloth, and, what we're coming up against here, Julen Lopetegui, obviously both managers are under massive pressure. Lopetegui's very clearly been given an ultimatum of win this game or you're out. So how much pressure does that put on not just him, but our individuals in the squad and, what we're trying to achieve? Because there's been rumors of bust-ups behind the scenes, players going against the manager, lots of different scenarios. So how do you get the dressing room back in this situation for such an important game on Monday night?
I think he is facing a near impossible task. At the end of the day, they are professionals. They should be up for a football match and they should be performing to the best of their ability. But there is a point when you look at your actions and you look at how you're affecting the team. And, I was kind of having a debate with people and talking about how Julen Lopetegui acted, particularly with Todibo. And, we're not going to give credence to the rumours going round.
Mm-hmm.
But I was asked, he's nearly 60. Do you think it's acceptable to physically confront someone? And I said, well, at the end of the day, if he's gone around, he's fallen out with multiple players. He did so at Wolves as well. He was renowned as a prickly customer. He fell out with a lot of the staff, apparently created a real division between his staff and the existing staff at the club. And was not just isolating players, like Aid Nouri is one of them. He was also, really confrontational. And whether you like it or not, at the end of the day, that doesn't work with everyone. And you will find that you're going to get your comeuppance. Whether people think that's acceptable or not, I don't think there's any excuse to act out like that, particularly when, let's face it, this is a football match. If Lopetegui had done something that warranted that, like, say, racially abused him or something like that, then yeah, fair enough. But I think he'd have been given his P45 if that was the case. It's not an issue to that severity. So I think the two issues are generally that you don't hear much rumblings from the Wolves camp at the moment. You don't hear about the unhappiness from a number of first team players. And for me, Wolves have got all the momentum behind them here. They have the chance to sack the manager who was just causing issues there and, give the fans back something, a little bit of satisfaction in a crap season. And if I'm the West Ham players, and if some of them want to take you out, you're going to have that bit in the back of your mind where you go, I don't really care about the result, which from a fan's point of view is abysmal. It's shocking. But from a individual player career point of view, if you've had a manager at work who you don't like and you think is incompetent, if you think they're, you know, putting your status at risk, then you're going to complain, aren't you? And I really think the fans have been let down, and it will be a case of whether now the owners can somehow manage to rescue it, or if you know, Lopetegui even scrapes a result. I don't see a long-term future. I just think, you know, we've said it on this channel a few times, but it's unsustainable, his football, and the performances are unsustainable. So for me, I don't see how he motivates them. I don't see how he gets a performance out of them, and I think we're really going to struggle.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough game, and you know, if anyone watched his press conference on Friday, tough watch, man. Really tough watch. Some really tough questions that were posed to him, and obviously that was to be expected. But it just looks a little bit defeated, very deflated, and that's obviously going to rub off on the players. It just hasn't worked at West Ham, and you know, Wolves are in a similar situation, if not a slightly worse one. You know, they've got a little bit more pressure because they are actively in the relegation zone. So when you're talking about relief for the fans and, you know, giving the fans back what they want, they're fighting for their future in this Premier League. You know, they can't really afford to go down either. It's such a difficult league to get back into and sustain. You know, how many teams now are coming up and going straight back down just because it's so difficult to do that. So they won't want to be in that position as well. But look, focusing on the game itself, I was surprised to see the back three, if I'm honest. But again, I don't think we'll see a back three against West Ham. They may well opt for that, but it just didn't work at Everton. And this was kind of the structure they set up with. So it was actually Lamina who was playing as the back three, which I found a very strange decision from Gary O'Neill to do. They were then playing that midfield pivot with Doherty on the right wing back and Aïnouri on the left wing back position. And then they kind of played two inverted wingers either side of Larson up top. So offensively, they have quality. They really do, but it's just the structural issues that we see with West Ham that is letting them down. And we kind of highlighted it. Just 4 minutes into the game here, that isn't a structure. That isn't anything. That's again playing Lamina as a right centre back was never going to work. In this situation, you can see just how unstructured it is. Dawson was often playing way too deep. I think the midfield pivot that they had is nowhere. It's very similar situation to West Ham where we don't have that presence in midfield that's just, you know, that natural six that's just going to shield and move side to side and act as that anchor point. In the first half, in this example against Everton, they didn't have that with the midfield pivot of two. I've forgotten their names, but there wasn't that cohesion. You know, they're good technical players, but they're not disruptors. They didn't have that disruptor. And it's similar to West Ham. We didn't really have that disruptor or engine for the majority of the season. And, you know, Alvarez, who's meant to be that person, hasn't been performing well enough and hasn't been disciplined enough. And Guido hasn't got the engine to do it. So Wolves actually have similar issues. And we've seen with West Ham's press how inconsistent it can be and how much space we can leave in that midfield. It was a very similar situation for Gary O'Neill's Wolves against Everton. I mean, you can see it here. So there's the 2-3 setup, obviously playing a 3-4-3 or a 5-2-3, however you want to look at it. So this is fine. But again, it's what are they being coached to press here? Because this is let me just take it back. This is 8 seconds after this. So Everton moved the ball side to side, and that's one of their midfield pivots going up into this position. And it's just so uncoordinated. And then they find themselves in this position where I don't know how many people have been watching our review shows, but how many times have we circled the middle of the pitch just completely vacant? And yeah, at the bottom of the screen there's your other midfielder for Wolves. So just completely vacant. And one ball up to Calvert-Lewin, a little knockdown, and look, they've got a 4v4 or a 5v4. And it's just, it's very similar to what we're seeing with West Ham. I mean, even looking at Lamina in this defensive shape, look how far back he is. How many times did we say that against Leicester that our line was an issue and we just didn't have that properly coached team? So I'm really seeing a lot of parallels with Wolves and West Ham at the moment where there's an uncoordinated press, the structure isn't good enough, and they're leaving way too much space between the midfield and defence. And that's where they're getting played through. And that's probably why West Ham and Wolves are where they are in the Premier League right now, and why we have probably the top 5 worst defensive records in the Premier League as a whole. So Thoughts on that, Sloth? Any parallels with West Ham you see there?
It's like a mirror almost, and I think what must be incredibly frustrating for Wolves fans is that they have the midfield talent. They have I would say they almost have the reverse issue. Their issue is coming from the back, where they haven't really invested the Kilman money properly, but also players like Jack Doherty. Now, Doherty is a consistent player, but he's someone that I think isn't the best defensively.
No.
Like, it's not. In the year of 2024, Craig Dawson and Doherty to be your starting defenders is a worry.
I mean, a back three of what? Bueno, Dawson, Lamina, and then you've got Doherty as your right wing back. Obviously, Aït-Nouri can play wing back, very well. But again, as you say, that isn't good enough for a Premier League team.
I think when you look at their midfield as well, they have, Andre is a fantastic player, and he's shown that across the season that he is playing well. Lamina, I don't understand why you would put him in the centre back position when you know that he is a real wrecking ball of a midfielder, and he has the assets to go forward. Mm-hmm. They also have, the young player from Strasbourg? Is it Bellegarde?
Oh, yeah.
And he is a real engine in the central midfielder. So why they are struggling and conceding so many chances, I think it falls down to the fact that defensively they don't have a structure. Much like us, they don't have a set plan, and they are just not switching on. That whatever they're being coached to do, the players are not picking up on, and you see that whenever there are such big gaps in the central midfield, that it's almost like a disconnect between areas of the pitch, and players revert back to old habits, and that's when problems start.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and it's very similar. So even in the first half against Everton, when I was watching it, they actually did some nice stuff on the ball. They've got some very good technical players. Andre and Gomez in midfield, as you mentioned. Cunha's a massive talent. They have players that can hurt you. Aït-Nouri was given that kind of free roam to go forwards a bit because they were playing a back three, as was Doherty. But then there's no plan B, which is the same for West Ham. They don't have all right, well, what if we lose the ball here? What's our reaction going to be? And to be honest, the attitude of the Wolves front three was nowhere near good enough. They were kind of just walking back. I think it was Guedes and Cunha on either side of Larson. There just wasn't that unity to get back in and help your team. And there just wasn't the structure behind what they were doing offensively if they did lose the ball, or if they were trying to press and, missing out on that transition. But they switched back to their back four for the second half, which is what we've seen Wolves predominantly play. So Lamina went in to play in the midfield, almost just as the more advanced eight, alongside Gomez and Andre in the midfield. And they went back to that kind of front three of Cunha, Guedes, and Larson. However, the pressing issues that we saw were still the same. Granted, they're 3-0 down at this point, so I'm assuming motivation isn't great. But again, we've seen this with West Ham, where we go to this situation and try and press. But all Everton do is literally just play one pass through, and then a ball over the top. And then again, you see exactly the exact same issues that West Ham see. Is you've got your front 4 or 5 pressing, and then you've got your back line dropping in, and just there's no midfield presence there. There's no, again, I think both sides lack that athletic engine as a number 6 that's just going to sit in there and be in this position no matter what's happening. And they were just way too exposed. And 4-0, couple of set pieces, couple of own goals. Sure, like it could have been less than that, but they weren't good enough. The attitude of the players wasn't good enough. The structure isn't good enough. And I think Wolves have massive issues under Gary O'Neill with the way they're trying to play and the coaching side of things. And to be honest, it's never a good sign when a manager's chopping and changing the way they're playing. Again, there's circumstantial. You might change it slightly for an opponent, but when you're trying to make things work and you're trying to change things so often, it's so hard to get into a flow of consistent performances and knowing what to do. And it's a similar situation with West Ham. It really is. And this is going to be the battle of the midfieldless teams on Monday night. But I think how do we approach this, Sloth, from a West Ham perspective? Because we're going to get into what we could potentially line up with in a moment. But structurally and how we set this up, what's the best approach here? Because we're not doing the basics and we keep seeing the same issues time and time again. Does Lopetegui need to stop being stubborn, let's say it, stubborn, and tweak what he's doing, because it's clearly not working?
He does. I think, unfortunately, once you lose a dressing room, then, you know, even if you do have the best plan B in the world, which you're late to adapt, you've lost the faith of the players. And I think that we should be, you know, making a big change in how we play and addressing what's going on. But I just don't think the Lopetegui's the man to do it. And when I'm looking at the fact that we could be against Strand Larsen and Cunha, both players are putting up numbers that, you know, it's not like they're not doing their job. They are producing, and I think they've hit double figures between them. So, like, I think Strand Larsen's got 6 goals and Cunha's got 5. But they, you know, they're going to pose a massive threat to our defence. And I haven't seen anything bar the Palace game, or, you know, if we give them the sort of chances we gave Newcastle, Cunha will lap them up at the moment. If we give them the sort of chances that, or defend like we did against Leicester, they're going to pick us apart.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be a major change in how we're playing. And I just don't really have any confidence that we'll do it. But I would not be surprised if there are a lot of goals in this game, because we're conceding for fun, or we should be conceding for fun. You know, our goals conceded could look very similar to Wolves if we'd been tonked by Man United.
Yeah.
And, you know, that would have been a fair reflection of that game. But it's a case of our defence is crap, their defence is crap, and
we're both just crap.
It is a case of we have some attacking outlets. They have a striker. We do not have a striker.
That's true.
It's, I mean, Fulkrug, you know.
Yeah. He won't be fit.
We haven't seen enough of it, have we?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so.
Well, kind of touching on the lineups then, Sloth, how do you expect West Ham to put out their starting 11? I've put something here where, again, there's a few positions that could be changed here. Again, midfield, maybe Souček in for one of Paqueta or Soler. The front three, maybe Somerville in there. What do you expect? I've kind of kept Todibo out because of what's happening as well. Is this something you would like? Would you be happy with this lineup? Would you make any changes to this, or are you expecting anything different here?
I mean, personally, after his embarrassing cameo against Leicester, I'd take Antonio out. He's done nothing to show that he should come back into the squad.
Who plays striker for you?
Kudus. I'd put Kudus there and Somerville on the left. I really don't understand his insistence on putting Kudus out on the left. It's not his
frustrating.
And, you know, Somerville and Kudus, they've clearly got a good understanding, good relationship with one another. Why would you not utilise that on the pitch? To me, it's baffling. Apparently, Somerville is one of the players he's also fallen out with, but so is Kudus. So it's a case of whatever he does, you know, I can hope for the 3 points, but what I cannot see happening is there being a turnaround.
Yeah.
And I think that is realistically our strongest lineup. You know, it's hopefully addressing those issues in the midfield that we're seeing, where maybe Alvarez can drop a bit deeper and not aimlessly run the forward and try and press.
Honestly, that's all I would do if I was Lopetegui. I'd just say to Alvarez, you're not allowed to move outside of the centre circle when we're in this position. Stop trying to chase and press, you know, like a headless chicken. Just stay in your position because we're getting caught out. I don't know why that hasn't been said, but hey, sorry, continue.
But look, he did exactly the same thing at Sevilla with Jules Koundé. You know, he was a right centre back, And he went, "Oh, you go and press, you go forward, use your pace." And it's like, that's great. Like, half the time, the other half, it's going to cost you a goal. You know, it may well be that he plays good football, or he can carry the ball or win possession. But if he loses it, or if he doesn't win it, there's a good chance you're going to concede. And, you know, it's very telling. And I think when we look at the changes that we said, I just don't see a positive turnaround for him. I can maybe see us scoring some goals if he makes those changes. Hopefully Antonio's had enough of a rest that he can actually play a 5-yard pass, which from, you know, people can dig me out for that, but as a professional footballer, that's unacceptable to me. You know, that's the sort of thing that happens at bloody school level football. It's
just across the squad, we've been so poor, and you know, players have to take a little bit of the responsibility as well. But yeah, it's a massive game, Sloth. Can I push you for a score prediction in this one?
Do you know what? I think we might just scrape it.
Really?
Yeah, we're both wincing at that, aren't we?
Yeah.
Which I think, you know, I wish Wolves all the very best, but I think we might just scrape it 2-1. I don't kind of, you know, I always want West Ham to win a game of football.
Yeah.
But I don't see how there's going to be the needed change. You know, 3 points is going to be important for us. But the most important thing, I think, is that the coach goes. And
would you rather not win this game if it meant Lopetegui goes?
I never want West Ham to lose a game of football.
Agreed.
I think the issue is that, unfortunately, we have a chairman who is so inept and short-sighted, dim-witted, and call it like you see it, because he's had multiple chances to invest properly, and he hasn't. It's a case of him constantly undercutting the fans and treating them like customers as opposed to actual supporters. He's had multiple chances to invest properly in the training ground. What's he done? He's thrown £5 million at the porter cabins. He's given them a lick of paint. He's, you know, built a slight curve on the outside of a building, and thrown a hot tub at the mix. It's embarrassing. And I don't think there's going to be any serious change under him. You know, it's the same with Lopetegui. It's the issues are going to be there regardless. And Moyes covered up a lot of the issues that he was being handed from the top, and the fish always rots from the head down.
Yeah, so agreed.
I think it's going to be a tough one, in case you can't guess by my ranting. But yeah,
it's going to be a tough game. Okay. I would like, obviously I want us to win. I just think Wolves defensively are just not good either. So it really could go either way. I'm going to go 2-2. I think it'll be a high scoring game, as you mentioned. I just don't see our defense being being good enough to win the game, but we'll see. I'm hoping for a 3 points, because it would be a massive 3 points to push ourselves 9 points clear of Wolves. Would be a big thing. Which is frustrating that we're having to say that. And I'm looking at fixtures like Leicester, Ipswich, Everton again. But hey, we're back. We're back. And yeah, it's gonna be a tough game. It'll be interesting to see how many fans actually go. There's been a few things online about boycotting the game, but yeah, we'll see what happens, see what the stadium feels like on Monday night, and hopefully we do get the 3 points regardless of all of the external stuff going on at the club right now. So yeah, let us know your predictions in the comments. How are you feeling going into this one? Do you think it will be Lopetegui's last game in charge of West Ham, or will it be Gary O'Neill's last game in charge of Wolves? Let us know down below. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and Sloth. Until the next one.
Come on, you irons.